We're going to have a Q&A period at the end, and I really encourage you to participate. And I like an open discourse where you feel comfortable asking any questions, because I really think that's important to really learning. Okay, so abuse prevention, how do we protect our children and create a safe space for communication? And the communication part is important because the discussions that the children have with us, either about the subject, but certainly if they're starting to feel uncomfortable around someone, or God forbid worse, it's an extremely uncomfortable conversation to have. So establishing the background, in other words, having the house rules include that they can talk to you about anything, is just so critically important. And we're going to be talking about that a little bit later. I'd like to start with a quick overview of Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And Maslow, just one second, please. Please forgive me, I'll be right with you. Okay, excuse me. So Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs is basically a theory, and the theory is that human needs are sequential, that there are different categories of needs. And when we say sequential, that means that, I'm using the cursor, I'll be using it throughout the talk, that this is level 1. This is a base. If you don't have level 1, it's very difficult to get 2. Without 2, you can't get to 3, so on and so forth. And his basic concept is that we should understand for ourselves and people we interact with how powerful this is. Now, like every theory, the theory is not perfect. I have some comments on it, but it's extraordinarily valid and important. And I really used it in education for 40 years now in so many different ways. Let's go through them quickly. So the lowest level is biological, physical, just our physical needs, to eat, to drink, sleep. Safety means the notion of feeling comfortable, feeling safe. Love, belonging, relationships, all of that, family, that all falls into this category of being emotionally connected to people. Self-esteem is feeling good about ourselves and feeling empowered to do whatever it is that we want to do. And self-actualization, in Yiddish we call it the steig. Self-actualization means to be all you could be, to grow, to achieve, to move forward, to fulfill our goals. So again, one more time, quickly reviewing this. So biological is physiological are just our physical needs: eat, sleep, shelter. Okay, safety is the next one. Love and belonging comes after that. Then self-esteem, then self-actualization. Now, just a simple one. I mean, just imagine if you're up 3 nights in a row with, hopefully for a good thing, but for something else, chas v'shalom. If you're up and you're just exhausted, so you need your sleep right now. So really, often you just can't get going because you're exhausted. Safety is certainly part of that, and here's just a simple example of that. Okay, so here's a practical example of this theory. And throughout this talk and all my talks, I like to do both theory and practice, meaning explaining why I'm making the suggestions that I do, and then talking about in real life how it applies. My feeling is that if you only get the practice, I only talk about suggestions of how to parent and in a variety of ways, that's only, again, if it's only practice, you'll be left not understanding why you're doing it. And if you only took theory, sometimes it's just difficult to apply it. So that's why I really believe in doing both. So we did the theory, but here's some practical examples, okay? Your car breaks down on the wrong side of the tracks. That's an American expression for, in a bad neighborhood. At that moment, your life coach calls to review 5-year goals, okay? Now just imagine your car breaks down in an area that you're not comfortable with. You have 2% left on your phone, 2% battery on your phone. And then you get a phone call, either let's do a different one than this example. Let's say a friend calls. You haven't seen the friend in a long time. COVID's over, it's close to over. So you say, oh, great, let's go out for coffee. I can't wait to see you. So what's happening in reality, follow the cursor, please. So you're missing safety right now. So you're not feeling comfortable. Someone is trying to engage you in a level 3 discussion, right? They're trying to, connect with you on an emotional level. And your head just, you can't get around it. You'll, in all likelihood, you just hang up, talk to you later. Why? Because you don't have the headspace. And even more so, here's the life coach, okay? This is a self-actualization. If someone calls up and says that they had a deep thought on something you've been studying together, or a life coach, for example, you're making 5-year goals, and your life coach says, remember we talked about that? You were supposed to do for homework, come up with more practical examples of your 5-year goals. And like, you're thinking to yourself, I don't know if I'll be around in 5 minutes. So it's almost impossible to really engage in these higher levels if the lower levels are being met. And we'll see for child safety especially, but I think for parenting overall, here's a very benign example that might help illustrate the same point in a non-frightening way, okay? So mom says, please do your homework, right, to your child, and your daughter says, yeah, but somebody's bullying me in school. I'm having difficulty. There's somebody who picks on me, or I'm having a hard time, or whatever it is. And you say, okay, what any parent would say, do your homework, and we'll talk later. Okay, I promise you, I love you, I'm worried about this, but let's talk later. And that might seem to make a lot of sense to you. Maslow would say that it's just not going to happen, because if your daughter is concerned about going back to school tomorrow because somebody's bullying her, so she's out safety. She's missing she's missing that level of safety. So you tell her homework is a 5, so it's just not going to happen. Okay, this is really powerful. It's more than people sometimes have difficulty with this. It's really almost an impossibility. Think Nebuch, this past, Lag BaOmer with everything that went on. Like, most of us just we didn't have headspace for anything other than that. So one way to think about it, and I really encourage you to think about this in terms of child safety, it's not technically, part of what the literature talks about child safety, but in a broader sense, the parent's most important role is to provide levels 1 and 2, is to provide the physical needs and that they're feeling safe. Now, that doesn't mean that you're going to follow them around everywhere and that they'll never feel stressed out, but it does mean that the children know that their safety and their comfort and their physiological needs are extremely important to you. And if something is not in order, that you're going to address it because you've told them that this is extremely important to you, okay? And now, ironically, one of the general rules of child safety training for children is that we're not supposed to frighten them. That when you have these discussions with the children, there should be a moderate amount of anxiety. In other words, enough to let the children know that it's important. But the research shows that if you really frighten your children and you tell them, you explain it to them in a way that unsettles them, the research shows that they won't remember much about what you said. And Dr. David Pelkowitz, who mentored me throughout the writing and the creation of our child safety book, and he was just incredible. He reviewed every image and every word of the book. And he said basically 2 or 3 out of 10 should be the anxiety level, enough to know that it's important, like you would talk to them about, not crossing the street, but not to frighten them beyond that. And if you notice, I'm not frightening you. I didn't tell you any frightening stories. I didn't tell you how bad things are purposely, because I don't want to go there. I want to empower you to feel that this is something that is eminently doable, and I want to make you comfortable with the notion that this is what you could do. So which brings us to child safety overall, again, with the understanding that those levels that Maslow discussed, we try to get this into our children from the bottom up and make sure that they're comfortable in every way. And there are basically 4 general child safety messages that I encourage you to speak to your children about. Again, understand it first. We're going to go through each one in detail, and we'll have some other follow-up material, and then we're going to go to questions. Okay, so the first message is no secrets from parents, meaning you tell your children, again, in a calm way, just that there's nothing that there's, nobody in this world is ever allowed to tell them to keep a secret from you. Okay, that's something that's just nobody else should be. Look, I was a school principal for many years and a Rebbe, and there's no way in this world that there's ever a set of circumstances that I should be telling a child, listen, let's keep this private, don't tell your parents. It's a huge red flag. And it reinforces to your children that this is something that's absolutely, that they have a right to talk to you about anything, and no one is ever allowed to tell you that. Okay, your body belongs to you is the notion of personal ownership of their own space. They have things, they have objects that belong to them. They understand this at an extremely young age. Now you're telling them that they belong to them. We'll get to that as well. Good touching, bad touching. Some touching is okay. Some touching is not okay. We'll talk about, a messaging for that. And no one has the right to make you feel uncomfortable. That 4th message is a little more difficult to explain because it's not as clear as the first 3. The first 3 are very, they're more cut and dry. This one is more of a feeling, and we'll talk about, why that's so important. Okay, so again, let's go back to the first of the 4, no secrets from parents. And again, the logic behind this is that predators don't want children speaking to parents regularly. Okay, this is really important. Part of the grooming process of the abusers. I'm going to give you a fantastic resource a little bit later, an article from Malcolm Gladwell that it's my #1 recommendation to parents to read about understanding the grooming process. It's very, very rare that only a very small percentage of abuse takes place, as a one-off, meaning that a stranger, abuses a child, or someone they know immediately goes, and abuses them. It's very rare. Usually it's someone much, much closer to us in that circle of ours, either the inner circle or one circle beyond that. And over the course of time, they try to invade the children's space a tiny little bit at a time because they don't want to get caught. And they don't know what the children know. They don't know if you've spoken to them. Okay, and they have if I'll do it during Q&A if you'd like, I can explain it a little bit more, but they, in a very cunning and evil way, they have a way of figuring out whom they should stay away from. And one of them is children that have very close relationships to their parents, okay? And again, like we said before, it's a huge red flag. There's no way that anybody should ever be saying that to your child. Okay, your body belongs to you. Again, that's the notion of personal space. Let's do the second one first. Think, how old does a child have to be to understand the concept of ownership? And it's really young, right? A 2-year-old, probably even younger, they understand that their pacifier, their blanket, they understand that stuff belongs to them. They understand that at a very, very young age. So what you're really training them to say is that they belong to them. One of the reasons that it's so important is because many of the beautiful lessons and the culture and the value system that we tell our children in this specific space about child safety could pose a problem. We tell children to be deferential to adults. We tell children to respect authority figures. We tell children, that becomes a problem. Again, obviously that becomes a problem. God forbid if one of those people take advantage. So, one way I like to think about it is that our Chachamim, our sages, they had it right a long, long time ago. And the Gemara talks, kabdehu v'chashtehu. Kabdehu, give kavod, but chashtehu, be suspicious. So that doesn't mean they should be suspicious of every adult and think that every adult's an abuser, but they should know what types of things are not okay. And the research shows that this top one here, even having a designated drawer at home helps children to protect themselves. So this is the gestalt of it. The big picture here is teaching your children that they belong to them, that with their siblings and with other people, they should respect the other people's space, and that people should respect their space. And again, there are so many different ways that you can be creative and teach this lesson. But again, here, the research about the drawers, I found it absolutely fascinating. So if children have their own space, they're at home, they can extrapolate from that other things belong to them. Now, there's so many ways you can do this. I mean, myself as a school principal, you know, I always spend time every day in the yard when the children were playing. And if the kids would be fighting with each other, I could say, don't fight, or get along with each other. I had this thing that I would do from one end of the yard to another. I would go like this. I would make a little box with my hands. I would point to a child or call the child's name and just do this. And that meant you're in somebody's space. And I specifically did it because of my training in child abuse prevention. I wanted the children from a very young age to get used to that. And everybody in the school knew what that was. And when they would come and talk to me, I wouldn't just talk to them about whatever they came to me for, but I would specifically say, you're in someone's space. And as a parent, that's a very easy thing to do. So keep it in mind. And as you have these discussions with your children, when invariably they get in each other's space, talk to them about that safe space. It's also parent. I don't want to spend too much time on this because it's really a sidebar, but it is important as parents. I would encourage you to look it up. Consequences rather than punishments, or outcome-based parenting, where instead of just randomly issuing a punishment, it becomes more logical and tied to an outcome of what they've done. I'll give you an example as far as this goes with the space. Let's say your children, you have kids playing in your play area, in the living room, the den, whatever, in an area that's a public space, and they're not, they're fighting with each other. So, if you say, go up to your room, Aviva, the child doesn't see any correlation there. Why am I going up to my room if I was? So that would be called a punishment, right? Not you're bigger, you make the rules, they have to listen to you. But there's no logic in the child's mind, and they're less likely to learn lessons from that. However, if you say, look, this is a common area, everybody shares this area. Now, you seem to be having a hard time with that now because you're in somebody else's space. So why don't you go up to your room? Oh, not why you have to go up to your room. And when you're ready to come back and share the space with others, then you come back. And if both of them do it, you do it to both of them. But it's just another opportunity to talk to them about space, about the notion of personal space. This is one of the pages from our child safety book. Once you get the theory and know about what those four messages are and how we're thinking, you'll see already looking through the pages about this notion. Okay, I've got a knapsack, my drawer, my private space, keep a lot of stuff there. My body is also private. And therefore, we show the child having a ball and other things, items that he or she has. So in order to be able to reinforce that notion of personal space. Okay, by the way, parenthetically, this is thanks to a grant we have. Stuart Schneer, who's our representative in Eretz Yisrael in Israel, is offering, to L'man Achai and Sister Circle free child safety books for anyone who requests them. You can do it through L'man Achai. So these are the four versions of our book. There's the English book. If you notice, all these look at these images, they're all the same message, just with a culturally appropriate furniture and dress and everything. So this is our English book. We have a Yiddish book that we made for Hasidic community. Masha B'tuach B'tuach is for the Haredi community in Israel. And Levetach is a child safety book that we just made for Dati Leumi families. And we just released that probably about 2 years ago. And I really encourage you to take advantage of the resource and have these discussions with the children. If you notice, that page is very child friendly. Again, there's nothing ominous about it. In fact, every single page in the book is like this. It's an upbeat reader that gives the messages to the children without frightening them. Okay, let's go to the last two. Good touching, bad touching. Is anything covered by a bathing suit is private? That's a good way to say it. It's a newer way. It's a comfortable way to say this. Anything that's covered by a bathing suit is private. And this is really important to list exceptions very carefully, because we would tend to say to our children, especially younger children who we have to touch, right? Your little children who need to be bathed and cleaned when they soil themselves. So we're going to wind up saying things like, well, no one's allowed to touch you in a place covered by a bathing suit, except for people in our family. So unfortunately, that's really highly not recommended to say it in that way. And the recommendation is that you say in very precise terms, Bobby, grandma, Sapta, whatever, when we're away, the parents can, a doctor when we go for a visit and someone's with you in the room, one of us are with you in the room, grandparent, if you have a nanny or child care, or they're going to a gun, but very, very specifically and limited to that. And when they get a little bit older, you say, soon you're going to be able to clean yourself, and then no one will be touching you in this private area unless, you hurt yourself or something like that. So listing these exceptions is just really an important thing to do as part of this. Now, the fourth message, I said, from the get-go that this is a little bit more challenging only because it's less precise. But the big idea is that no one has the right to make you feel uncomfortable. That the children, especially if it's an adult, many times over, if that adult is someone they are supposed to be respecting, as someone who, like, again, we said it's that little circle, so that could be, a family member, a member of the community, someone in their school, even someone, in the leadership, or it could be anyone. We don't know. We have to kadev v'chashteo. We can't make exceptions. Like I said earlier, respect, but trust but verify is what is another way of saying that, right? Trust but verify. So the notion, the message that we're teaching our children is that if they feel uncomfortable, despite the fact that they're supposed to respect that person, and they have a right to leave, and they just have to tell you, I was uncomfortable and I left. And that means if that person comes to you and says, your son was disrespectful, or daughter, whatever, I was talking and whatever, your child was, we told our children that if they feel uncomfortable, they can leave and they come to us. And that we will respect their ability and back up their ability to leave a situation where they feel uncomfortable. And this also, we'll talk about by grooming. Why this is so important is because it's a slow process. The grooming process is a slow process, and very often at the beginning, the types of things that would make children uncomfortable, they might not have the language to articulate. Think of yourselves, okay? We all know the feeling. We're with someone and they just bug us out. They make us feel kind of weird. And for a child, it could be, or an adult, if someone's staring at you, with an open stare, or they're getting too close to you, and you just feel like you need to get some space. So the children in the grooming process could be going through that same thing. They might not have the language to express it to you. So if you have a 6 or an 8 or a 10, even a 12-year-old kid, if they're starting to feel uncomfortable, I feel uncomfortable around so-and-so. And you say, well, what happened? Did touch you in an inappropriate place? No. What happened? He put his hand on my shoulder. Okay, she put her hand on my shoulder, whatever. So you say, it was on your shoulder? Yeah. Now, what the child couldn't articulate is that the hand lingered on his shoulder way too long, or her shoulder. And it just bugged them out. Again, they might not have the language. And here's another some points on this. It not whom was something I heard from a police chief in Alpine, New Jersey. We did a talk together about 15 years ago on child abuse prevention. He was talking about it means what happened, whom is who did it. And when we make value judgments about whether or not we should be nervous, what we typically do is we layer there are two variables here. There are two factors that we're considering. It, what happened, what was done, and who was the person who did it. And we sort of, mix those two together and we come up with a worry and not worry. And the police chief's very strong advice, I thought it was brilliant the way he expressed it, is that just judge the action, not the person. And if you would think that something that someone did, if you would think that someone you don't respect or someone you might look a little spooky, but if somebody did something, you would be uncomfortable, then you should be uncomfortable no matter who does it. It's not about the one, it's not about the one who did it, it's what they did. And you'll see, I encourage you to think this way. When you start blocking out the whom and you say, look, unfortunately, anybody could do this, anyone. So you just judge the actions. And the reason this is so important is because of the halo effect. I encourage you to Google this if you, I was an 8th grade Rebbe for 15 years, so you can Google it right now. If I see, I don't get distracted. I'm used to people doing stuff while I'm talking. You feel free to look it up right now. But the halo effect means that we make judgments about people based on previous experiences. So the original research was done on people in the Army, and they found that the privates in the Army, the folks in the Army, the soldiers who were well dressed, and they all wore the same uniform, but who were put together and were attractive looking, got much better grades than the people who looked like they didn't have it together. And that triggered lots of research into other assumptions that we make, including grading test papers, right? The research shows that if you're reading essays and the first essay was perfect, you're much more likely to judge that second essay more favorably. And even if that person, if this student that aced that first essay, let's say, there's 3 essays in a standardized test, you're going to judge that second one more favorably. And if it doesn't say what you really wanted it to say about this subject, you say, yeah, they probably meant it, and that's the way we think. In fact, these tests typically are graded all number 1s, all number 2s with the name covered. Some people, even some, organizations actually give it to different people to judge, to read, because it's just a bias. Another example I give of this is someone reading the Torah in shul. Okay, you have a Bakri in shul. Just imagine, fellow never made a mistake in 30 years. Everybody knows this guy is perfect. It's like a machine. Just turn him on, gets up there, and he reads the parsha without a mistake. Imagine that he makes a mistake one day. Now I'm telling you, Yanki Horowitz, if I'm in the audience and I hear this fellow make a mistake, in all likelihood, I'm not going to say anything. Even if I see it in my chumash, I'll say, I need to clean my glasses, or, maybe his grandfather has a different custom how to read these words. You're not going to want to get up there and yell in public, hey, you made a mistake, or because you feel foolish. How could you compare to this person? And if you see again and again and again, when we find out about these terrible abuse cases, very often the people were doing it right in front of everyone. And they just, we assumed that it was kind of okay. So that's the message. The children should know that we are supporting their right to feel comfortable, even if they can't articulate it, even if it's somebody that's extremely well respected, they have a right to get out. And, you know, these four examples are all important. And I deeply encourage everyone, strongly encourage you to follow them. But I also encourage you to add your own things to it. Think creatively about how you could reinforce these messages or other things that you can tell your children. I was floored. A fellow called me years ago, Hasidic fellow who lives in Brooklyn, and he gave his son a watch. When the son started to go to shul, he bought him a watch. You know, he lived down in a very Hasidic shul with a very large population, and he was concerned about, you know, supervision. Even the child sat next to him, but he goes out to use the washroom or whatever. So he bought his son a watch, but he told me specifically for this. And he told him that if anybody corners him in a room or if he's in a place that he's uncomfortable, he should look at his watch and say, I have to meet my father in 2 minutes. Isn't that brilliant? And he called me to tell me he was at one of my classes. And I didn't say this, I just encouraged him to think otherwise. He said, you know, I thought of this idea for shul that I gave my son a watch and told him this. And he was actually confronted by someone who cornered him in a room. And he on the spot, he says, I'm meeting my father now. And he got off the hook. And unfortunately, it turned out he right away notified the village elders, you know, the people in the shul, and they found out that in fact he'd been abusing other kids. And they got it. So be creative and think of things in ways that work for you. Now, In Plain View is my reading recommendation. It's written by Malcolm Gladwell, who wrote Blink and Tipping Point, Outliers. He's just a brilliant writer. And he wrote a piece on the Jerry Sandusky case, who was a serial abuser in Penn State University. There was a coach named Joe Paterno, who was the head coach of the football team there. And he was revered by all accounts, a decent person who really cared about the students. And he was the coach there for decades. And Sandusky was his assistant, and he got away with it. And he got away with abusing kids for a very long time. And Gladwell asked the question, how did he get away with it in plain view, like I told you before? And he goes through how the grooming process works. And he has a real gift for articulation. So, you know, I would just encourage you to have a look at that, or any other, frankly, any other there's great material online. Many municipalities have really good material for various ages. The more educated you are, the better you'll be able to have these conversations with your kids, and the more attuned you'll be to be getting feedback. One final thing, and then one final thing in this, and this I'll be glad to take during question and answer if you have any more to say about this, because really I'm just I'm covering the tip of the iceberg. Okay. Now, the notion behind this is that what you see is that little bit on top. And now, this is not only for child safety; it's for everything. It's for, and especially as the kids, go through adolescence. The things that they need, let's put it this way: the things that they need guidance about is not this stuff. They need guidance for the bottom. And the 90% that you don't see. Now, that's not to suggest that parents are clueless and you don't see 90% of what's going on. 90% of the things that they need guidance about, they're less likely to talk to you about. It's an entire, it's an entire discussion about how to create that environment with your children where your children can confide in you. I mentioned at the beginning, will they be able to come to you and talk to you about things that make them uncomfortable? And it's a very uncomfortable discussion. And, think of ourselves as adults, if even we wouldn't be comfortable talking about this stuff. So it's, again, this isn't for 2 minutes, but I think of it as a supervisor and a mentor. Supervisor means our role as parents where we just tell kids what to do. And a mentor means that you guide them and they come to you. It's a whole thing. I actually did a talk on this. I did a series of classes this summer. They're all free They're all on YouTube. If you just Google my name, Yaakov Horowitz, I have a YouTube channel that you can subscribe to for free. If you just go YouTube Yaakov Horowitz, so any new materials that we publish, like including this, will be up on my YouTube page. But I did a series called Mentor or Supervisor, Guiding Your Teens and Tweens into Adulthood. Module 3, the third talk was, would your kids tell you? Okay, having your kids seek your guidance, mentorship when they need it most. I actually invited our daughter, Sarah Horowitz Berkovich, who actually just finished, she's just graduating right now. You know, next week is the formal graduation from LIU as a social worker. But I actually invited her that people could ask her questions about what it was like to be able to talk to your parents. Does that mean that they let you do what you want? You know, there are so many questions. If you're committed to thinking about doing things this way, it's a whole subject in and of itself. So I would just encourage you to have a look at that. Just a few minutes. I know we have, you know, Sister Circle. So I want to talk about single parenting and just to share with you some thoughts. My mother, my mother was a single mom for 2.5 years. So, you know, I certainly am not unbiased when it comes to this whole subject. But those of you who are single parents, I've never felt that, obviously my biases aside, but I've never felt that just growing up in a one-parent household is a huge risk factor. I think growing up in unhappy homes with this strife is a risk factor. And it might be more likely, you know, that if there's stress or you know, related to any of the issues that revolve around single parenting. But, you know, I did this talk, by the way, if you're looking, it's called Grieving and Growing. I just did this talk on my father's 58th yahrzeit a few weeks ago. I do a talk every year on these themes. So I spoke about what a large percentage of very high achievers went through difficult things as kids, whether they had disabilities or the like. And so it's called Grieving and Growing, talking about how having challenges in childhood, while it's not something that we were looking for, really can bring out incredible qualities in people. You might find it, I hope you would find it, especially if you're a single parent and you're feeling kind of intimidated by it all. I really would encourage you to have a listen, because I really speak about practical reasons and some research. 12 presidents out of 46, that's an enormous number statistically, lost a parent before the age of 12. Okay, and there's many other, you know, research on that. They're also twice as likely to be arrested, you know, to wind up in jail. So it's certainly not you know, I'm not suggesting that it's not an issue, but I just encourage you to do what you're doing and not be, you know, not be frightened by and think that this somehow means that your child, you know, is you know, behind the 8 ball, or your children are, you know, not likely to succeed and achieve everything you hope and dream for them. I found that it's not the case. My biases, of course, but, you know, I really found that that's not the case. And I just want to share with you, just in closing, I want to share with you an extraordinary quote that I heard from Rav Mordechai Schwab Zatzal, and then someone quoting Rabbi Schwab. Rav Shimon Schwab was his more famous brother, who's the Rav in Washington Heights of the Yeki community, the German-American community in Washington Heights. He had a brother, Rav Mordechai, who's a real tzaddik. I had the pleasure of knowing him here in Monsey. He lived in Monsey. They're both in Gan Eden already. But I was asked to do a talk on single parenting then. And it was for a group of widows, an organization that helped widows, that asked me to interview, to share some thoughts, you know, about growing up without a father, and my mother, Baruch Hashem, married, but a wonderful man. But, you know, I was asked to do this talk. My practice is, when I'm asked to do something, a new topic that I'm preparing for, I like interviewing, I like searching for best practices. So I sat down and thought to myself, how many widows do I know that really raised amazing kids whose children were all grown? So um, I did interview my mother. I actually wrote an article. If you're interested, you can look that one up too. I wrote an article together with my mother called One Foot in Front of the Other. It was a Mishpacha magazine. You can look it up in Times of Israel or on my website. It's called One Foot in Front of the Other. I interviewed her on my father's 50th yahrzeit and asked her, what advice would you give someone, God forbid, who lost their husband just now recently? What advice would you have for them? I'm so glad I did it. It was really beautiful. She wrote it up and it was published. But I interviewed 4 other people, and one of them I know a couple of the kids, and she actually had a large family. She was left alone in her 30s with a large family. And I asked her if I cold called her and just asked her if I know the boys. So I just asked her if I could ask one of the boys, tell him, I want to discuss something with your mom. Just give me a number and please tell her that I'll be calling. So I said, I'd like to interview you. Can I come over? So she said, what? I said, I'm doing a talk on single parenting or raising kids after the death of a parent. So she said, sure, come over. Now, I asked her to have one of the kids there for yichud purposes. So one of her sons, one of the ones that I know, sat in on the interview. And it was such a Kodak moment. It was like something totally unexpected, and it was so profound. I prepared certain questions that I asked each of them, and then I was winging the rest of it. But there were questions that I asked each of them, and I asked every one of the 5, what was the best piece of advice? What was the best piece of advice that you got when you were feeling vulnerable? So my mother said that her father told her, don't worry about what people are saying. Seriously. He said, because my mother always said, Allah Shalom, she passed away. She always said that, when till my father died, she was just a housewife. Nobody, and then all of a sudden, everybody had an opinion. You're wearing too much makeup or too little makeup. Your husband just died. Why are you laughing? You should be more, whatever. You're too strict with the kids. You're too lenient with the kids. Whatever. Everybody had an opinion, and she was complaining to my grandfather, and he says, "Let's just ignore." That was my mother's answer. So I asked this woman, and it was really interesting because the son, obviously, he had never asked his mother these questions. So he was like really curious to see what would happen. So he asked his mother, Ma, could I sit in? Could I sit at the table? So she said, sure, of course. Hi, guys. Excuse me. So I asked her what was the best advice she got. And she said that she went to Martha Schwab. Excuse me. And Schwab told her that we have a balance. Hashem has a balance between din and rachamim, between law, din, judgment, and mercy and rachmanas. So we find Hashem, the term Elokim means din, more judgment. When the name Elokim appears in the Torah, it means a din, and Hashem is more rachamim. So Rav Schwab said that as parents, we have this blend of din and rachamim. And he said, your family, has all the din you can handle. Your family has all the din that they could handle. It's your job to be virtually all rachamim. That's what he told her. And he told her to make sure that their home is happy, and she should play music in the house and just do her best. Obviously, she was struggling with, her part of all of this. But that was his advice. He said, your family has all the din it can handle. Your job is to do rachamim. What was fascinating is the boy said, the young man said, Ma, was I in third grade when you had that discussion with him? And she was like ticking, you could see her counting, in her brain. And she said, yeah, why did you say that? She says, we all noticed something. He didn't say, Ma, so you thought you were taking happy pills. But he said, we all noticed that there was a great change in the house. So I just wanted to share that with you, that, single parenting has lots of challenges and in so many different areas. I'll gladly take during Q&A. But first of all, feel empowered in your ability to raise great kids, maybe even greater kids. And just do your best. Rav Schwab didn't say Maslow, but that's really what he meant. Those lower levels of stability and the like. So I'll take some questions. I just wanted to show you that I have, these are other parts of the series. They're all on YouTube. I did it during COVID. I rarely have the same audience again and again. So I figured COVID, everybody was home during the summer. I did 7 talks. This was about adolescence. That I think I missed one. There's one on technology, one on how to troubleshoot if your child is going through a difficult time. The bedrock was about, the other topic for this was parenting a child who breaks your heart. How to parent a child that's going through a difficult time, and just be happy with us was an extension of the second of that one. So I really would encourage you, if you have, I'll be glad to take questions, but for more on this, to some of the issues that I discussed briefly, especially the issue of having this open relationship, feel free to look at there. And this is absolutely not public, so I ask everyone please to treat this. I'm just in the process of getting ready to launch a parenting forum, because people try to get in touch with me and I don't always have the time. So this is in beta mode, which means it's not officially launched. And I please just don't put this on social media. I'm not ready for a large pile of questions, but here's the website, thebrightbeginnings.com. You can sign up and you can just click on forum here or here, and you go to parenting forum. You can post your own question, and I'm trying to set aside time every day for folks who have questions, if you would like to follow up on it. So please, I'm just asking you, please don't put this on social media. I don't mind if you share it retail, meaning you tell one person or two, but please don't put it on social media. I'm absolutely not ready for all of that. I'll be delighted to take your questions. I really hope you found it helpful, and continue to grow, to learn, to study. The more you understand, I've always believed this, the more you understand and the better you understand parenting, the more equipped you'll be to deal with it. I always tell parents, think of your favorite teacher in school. I can almost guarantee you that person had a certain aura that, that they were in complete control. Whether they were nervous or not is nobody's business. But you got the feeling that you're not rattling this person. And we're weakest. Children act out when children have, children tend to act out when they feel they don't have the tools to deal with what's on their plate. So as parents, the more you learn, the more you study. That first section, the first of the 7 talks, is all about adolescence, how adolescence works, how children develop. And when you understand it, when you learn about it and you study it, I have it's just like these talks, they're all like that, theory and practice, very practical, but explaining the theory. If you understand how adolescents work, then you're so much more likely to be able to deal with it effectively. So I really encourage you to study, learn, grow, and there's so much good wisdom out there that can help you raise your children, especially if you're single parenting. Okay, take it away, please. Go. Did you take back the controls, Heidi?
Yeah. Can
Okay.
you hear me?
So,
Okay.
yep. Go ahead, please.
If you have questions, I'll unmute anybody that has
hand
questions. I
on.
see somebody.
I see
Yeah.
something note 9.
Okay.
There's a hand there.
Go ahead. Read me.
Maybe you want to unmute them. So yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay, go
Is
ahead.
that good?
Yeah.
The thing for me is that there's all these techniques that we give to kids how they can protect themselves. However, what bothers me is that that would mean waiting until something bad happened to them and they were already traumatized, maybe not as badly as they could have been, but they're already traumatized. And then maybe we'll be smart enough to wise up and come to the rescue, and maybe somebody will listen, and maybe they'll believe us, and maybe they'll actually do something, and maybe the guy will admit, and maybe somehow we'll be able to protect the kid. But what bothers me is that there's no push or effort to identify the people who are the predators before they do something. I mean, we have all these people in positions of authority that are usually they're counselors, they're teachers, they're rebbes, they're psychologists. In Israel, we've had a few horror stories lately, like the head of Zaka and this big rabbi and that big rabbi. Sometimes I wonder, you know, how they got to their positions of supposed rabbi. Were they really rabbis, or did they kind of like work their way up somehow or another? But in a lot of these people, the antisocial personality had the writing on the wall for anybody who knows how to recognize it. And people who are trained, like psychiatrists and so on, or criminal investigators, there's only a few people who are really well trained in how to identify them. They look at the person and within 5 minutes they go, oh yeah, you know, he's one of them. Why don't we have somebody like that trying to identify these people before we give them free reign and access to our kids? You know, I had a kid that was at 11, and one of the teachers started to do stuff, and this parent said something, and that parent said something, and the other parent said something, and everybody was, well, no, he didn't really do anything so bad, and he would sweet talk his way out of it, and he would seem charming and nice, and he, you know, he'd sweet talk the parents and sweet talk the principals, and you know, it took forever until anybody believed anything. And by then, anybody who had been under his tutelage was damaged, even though he hadn't actually molested anyone. He just maybe touched them inappropriately, or played with their heads, or followed them around, or cornered them, or made them uncomfortable. And every single one of those kids has problems till today. But there was nobody really listening or aware that there could be somebody doing something like that, or how to protect their kids, or there's no checklist on how to identify. There are checklists, you know, even you can go online and look for the checklists, how to identify antisocial personality disorder, because almost everybody that's a pedophile is either antisocial or sociopath or psychopathic, or, you know, they have some sort of, could be bipolar, but they've got some sort of mental disorder that would be obvious to somebody who knows how to identify it. So if they gave the parents some of the tools, like even something simple, like they want to be called by their first name, or they're being too chummy, or they like to corner a kid. You know, there's all these behaviors. Why does the kid have to come and report? Can't the parents like be a little bit more aware?
So the questions, all these various threads of your questions are all excellent. First of all, parenthetically, I actually made a YouTube video when the Zaka thing broke, encouraging parents to use that opportunity to speak to their children. Just, and I know this doesn't answer your question.
Again, you're putting it on the kids.
No.
Why don't the parents identify the guy before he has access to the kids?
Let me answer your question for that. No parents. Yeah. I'll take the body of your question first. So I've always felt that people should report abuse directly to the authorities. I've been.
No, before they get to abuse, there's certain personality traits
personalities
before they start being abusive.
But if you look around, most of the abusers don't have these personality traits are not always visible. And
not to the untrained eye, but
true.
anybody who is trained, they're really good at it. 5 minutes with the guy and they go, oh yeah, this is one of them.
I'm just telling you, listen, I'm telling you that many of the serial pedophiles get away with it because they come across as being charming and
people don't pick up on the signs, and there are signs, but we don't pick up on them because we're not taught. The parents aren't taught, the teachers aren't taught, the schools aren't taught.
One of the things that I did when I started, I got into this space. I was an 8th grade Rebbe and a principal of yeshiva. And this whole child abuse thing just came to me because I was dealing with teens at risk, and I noticed that a very large percentage of the kids who were self-destructing now had been abused. And I read a number of books, and I went to Dr. Pelkowitz and others. So one of the top books that was recommended to me was a doctor, therapist, trained therapist, that went around to prisons for 20 years interviewing serial pedophiles and asked them.
Exactly, that kind. Can we hire them for a day to go around to all the schools?
She wrote at the beginning in the introduction that I did this, spent these 20 years because I wanted to be able to tell you what to look for. And there's nothing to look for. You couldn't, she said, this is what she said, and this is what all the experts, I encourage you to look it up online. Yes, there are people that after the fact will tell you that they noticed certain things. If you notice, one of the things that, so again, this
But she could identify them, right? She'd be able to identify them.
You could not tell.
She couldn't tell either?
Oh, that's what she wrote in the introduction. In the introduction, she wrote that I can teach you what they do, but I can't tell you how to identify a person because they're not all the same, and most of them don't exhibit these tendencies in public. So I'm just telling you, it's not that doesn't mean that there aren't, when people are doing, remember I said about the it and the whom? So I said, focus on what they're doing, because when you think about the whom, you're more likely to miss people. If you focus on what they're doing, there was a
there should be a checklist of things that they do, or have the principals, the social workers, they should be trained in identifying at least the behaviors. You know, how does any psychiatrist identify them? They have checklists and they have questionnaires. The social workers are supposed to, but they can't ever pick it up because they don't have the right questionnaires.
A big scandal a few years ago in Israel that a fellow who ran 4 seminaries, was accused of abuse, and whatever it is, and he was picking up girls and taking them girls up from the schools for his students and taking them out at 1:30 in the morning, at 1 o'clock in the morning for ice cream or whatever it is. Nehemiah Weberman, who I got involved in his case, who was a serial abuser in Williamsburg, that I supported the victim throughout the trial. I have a picture of him. He was eating, he's a Hasidic fellow in the middle of Williamsburg. He was sitting at a pizza shop, having an ice cream with a 16-year-old girl. So if you read Gladwell's piece, he writes there in plain view because he says they do these things in plain view and we get used to them. And we say, that's just Jerry being Jerry. Jerry Sandusky used to do weird things. I really encourage you to read that article carefully, that in plain view. It's not that simple. There aren't, the best way, people in communal life have a responsibility to speak up when they see things wrong, and we shouldn't be shuffling around people who are abusing children from one school to another. They should be reported to the authorities. But I'm saying, having said that, the best way, what all the experts told me, is that the best way to do it is to focus on what they're doing. Because if we focus on who it is and you try to figure out the character traits of what they're doing, it's very rare. Look at the people who got away with abuse. Look at Bill Cosby. I'm saying in the general population also. He was America's dad, But if you notice what they're doing things. That's why you're certainly correct that we should be looking for things. And if we find people who are abusing children or acting in grooming ways that are grooming, they should be reported, and we should never, ever, ever cover up on them. I'm being sued. I'm still having open lawsuits from a sex offender in Israel named Yonah Weinberg, who sued me for slander because I warned people in Harnof that he came from America and people should watch out. It's been a schlepping for 5 years. So I do warn people in public, but he's came across as a very charming person. He was tutoring hundreds of kids before this, hundreds, many children. So that's what I encourage you to do. Think about what they're doing, and I encourage you to study the research on this. Read Gladwell's piece. So they do goofy things because they do goofy things, and when people see them doing strange things, they say, "Oh, that's just Jerry being Jerry." Let me just take some other questions, please. Thank you very much for your question. Anyone else, folks?
I had a question. I wanted to know which books or places that I could find more information about the type of parenting you were speaking about like being very open and having like an open communication. And also you mentioned the like to in order to like prevent these kinds of situations.
Right.
And also like you mentioned the versus punishment versus like a consequence, like
Right.
those kinds of resources.
So I go through all of these things in that series of talks. It's free. I'm not, I'm not telling you that because I'm making a commission. I would encourage you to watch those videos, and you'll come up with. I do make some. I typically don't recommend books of specific things because most people have very different tendencies in how they process information. Some people like a schmoozy book, and some people like just the facts. Don't tell me the schmoozy stuff. Tell me what I need to know. And some, people. I don't read anything that frightens me. And somebody says, do me a favor, just give it to me. No cream, no sugar. Just give me the coffee black. So people have different ways of processing information. So I know what my personality profile is. There's a whole talk on personality profiles, by the way. So something I've been studying for a long time. So I don't make recommendations. The best material usually is the government material. Like you see, go to cities, a lot of the municipalities in America. I'm not familiar in Israel, but they have a lot of great material that people did research on and studied. In other words, looking for signs and how to, all of these things. But it really depends. It depends on you'll see if you'll find you might. Some of you folks might look at this in plain view and say, "Oh, Gladwell, blah blah blah." He just talks a lot, You might not find that meaningful either. So study, learn. Again, I would encourage you, if you're interested in all of these threads that I discussed are in the series of 7 talks that I gave. And I have a whole talk on number 3 is about open communication, but there are other things about some of those other subjects also. But again, if you Google search, I think you're very likely to find great material. Again, the reason that I recommend to go to establish, there's a lot of in the fire hose of information out there. There's a lot of stuff that's, people throw out opinions that's not research based. So if you find, let's say, something from the Mayo Clinic, or a city, the government puts out stuff. Usually that's vetted very carefully, and it's done, it's done in a wholesome way where you'll be able to know that it's research based. That would be the best advice I could give you.
Rabbi Horowitz, somebody put in the chat, I understand that in the Haredi world, most cases happen in the family. How can children learn who is safe?
Right, thank you for asking. Yeah, so again, just what we said during the talk, the way to do this is to tell the children that the rules apply to everyone. And when I did that good touching, bad touching, right? It's the advice was to say, no one's allowed to touch you in a private space, except in a very, very narrow way. And you tell children that, I gave you that example about making that little box. Teach the children that no one should get in each other's space, even your brother and sister, even your uncles, even your, grandparents. And by the way, we all have a role to play in this, because we support this learning when we tell our grandchildren and our nieces and nephews that if I'm doing something that makes me uncomfortable, tell me. A lot of times you roughhouse. I do it with, I make a fool out of myself like all grandparents. I get on the floor with it. So I horse around with them. I always tell the kids, if something that Zaidi's doing that makes you uncomfortable, stop. Just tell me and I'll stop right away. The first time I got feedback on it was, I'll still never forget it. It was Shavuos, our oldest grandchild, who's now Knei Nahara, was 14, was two at the time. It was on Shavuos. And I was reading them, The Three Little Pigs. When my kids were young, we used to huff and I'll puff and I'll blow. I would blow on the kids. And he stopped me, he said, Zaidi, I don't like when you blow like that. Please stop. He didn't like that I was blowing in his face. And I said, thank you so much for telling me. I never did it again to any of them. But we can help reinforce these messages when we tell children, thank you for telling me. Anything I do that you don't like, tell me and I'll stop. Okay, but it's true. A very large percentage, not just Haredi families, by the way, that it's in the family, it's everyone. The abuse mostly happens, like I said, in that inner circle and that second ring. So this advice is universal. It's really for everyone. Did you have a
A
follow-up on that?
continuation, a follow-up, it says, how can children learn who is safe, but it can even be a father?
Right. Excuse me. That's correct. Excuse me. And that part is, excuse me, please. That part is tricky. It's difficult. You know, it's true. There are fathers who abuse their children. And, you know, the very best that, if you notice, I said, when you say who's giving you the bath, you know, I said, Sab, grandma, when she's over, well, Bobby, when she's over at the house, babysitting. I didn't say Saidi, even though I bathe our grandchildren all the time. But again, I think we need to be careful. We need to tell our children to speak up when things make them uncomfortable. I can tell you from personal experience of dealing with thousands of families that this stuff really works. So it is much more challenging within a family. Not only that, but if a family member is abusing, it's so much more challenging to go to the authorities, right? I mean, it blows up in the whole family. But speaking to the children openly and telling them what to look out for, you know, is the best thing that you could do, and you know, have the same types of practices. I've asked many parents over the years have told me that you know, we teach our children these rules, and we go to my in-laws and my parents for Yom Tov, and my brother-in-law doesn't respect what we say, and he tickles the kids, or he doesn't. My kids don't like it, and I tell them, say it once, say it twice, and don't go. I said, you know, you can't do, you have to speak up for yourself. Either speak up more forcefully, like it's not okay. It's not okay if you're in a situation. I know every situation is different, and some of them are very complicated. But if a relative of yours is, including grandparents, if a relative of yours is encroaching on the children's space, I tell them, speak up, say it nice. You don't have to say you're an abuser, but the nice way to say it is, this is how we trained our children. Give them a book from the school or some training manual. This is what we told our children. And it's predicated on the notion that they have a right to say no if they're uncomfortable. And dad, mom, you know, Abba, Ima, I need you to do this. I need you to follow and respect it, even though you didn't do it with us and people in your generation didn't do this. You know, I do classes for grandparents. And one of the things, you know, they go, what's this timeout nonsense? We told our kids what to do, you know, whatever. So I'm saying, you know, my generation obviously was not raised like this. So a lot of parents, people my age, call me and say, what are you, Horowitz, what are you doing? You're making everybody crazy. You know, they came, a true story, somebody, I'm not laughing, it's a serious subject, but you can laugh also, I guess. Now, it wasn't a chashuv and abuse situation, but a long time ago, years ago, someone called me, he dropped off his kids at summer camp, and I didn't know that. He just called me like it was the end of June. We're great friends. He said, Yankee, cut it out. He said, we got the message, cut it out. You know, what happened? He dropped off his child at the bus for the summer camp. And he said, somebody came over and the counselor gave him Shalom Aleichem, and he said, their mother said not to touch you. Okay, so, you know, so he said, knock it off, Yankee. But again, you should give the children the guidelines. I also got a call from a woman, a Canadian woman. Also, you know, some of these are just inscribed in my mind. My wife and I were driving somewhere, and I got a call from a Canadian mom who was their child was their son was inappropriately not abused, but certainly heavy grooming, not abused, but it was wildly inappropriate. He was being touched by happened to have been a faculty member, and he went into the office and said, I want to call my mother. So they said, yeah, you can only call on Fridays or whatever. So he started yelling at the top of his lungs, which I said they should do. Yell at the top of your lungs and say, my mother said if somebody touches me, I should call her. And lickety split, she got a phone call and she saved the child. They fired the person, and they found that he was abusing other kids. so their child knew what to do. So this certainly needs to be taken seriously and across the board. Anyone else?
No?
Okay, I'll just take that last direct message, the chat question, and then we'll call it a night. The balance between kids tickling each other. One is very sensory. I'm nervous that I might get carried away, without realizing what's a slippery slope. So I think the best thing is to tickling is normal. Not every person that tickles is abusive, but the children should have a right to say no. That's the operative thing. If you see as a parent that some of it's going beyond what's appropriate, you should certainly step in and say something. I'm sorry, we don't do this. Maybe she doesn't like it, but she said it's okay. You still can't do it. You can't, and you set what that guideline is. But certainly children have the right to express their discomfort, and then you have to back them 100% when they tell you something like that. Okay? I hope you all found it helpful. Again,
Rabbi, I just wanted to say thank you very much. I really enjoyed your talk and I learned a lot. And I was very touched by what you said about parenting with rachamim, because a very wise woman once said to me that parenting with rachamim actually means listening to your children and understanding where they come, what is going through their mind and what they're feeling. And that's really what this is all about. And so I thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you very much. Thank you. I wish you all mazel and bracha and hatzlacha and nachas from your kids. Good luck, everyone. And again, we have safety books available for any of you who'd like to take advantage of the grant we have to give them out. Okay, be well, everyone. Good night.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Thank you to everybody for
Thank you very
participating
much.
tonight.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.